Hey, what's up folks? I've always wondered, when Game Freak decides which new Pokemon to create for a new generation, how do they decide the right stats to give to these Pokemon? It seems like a bit of a delicate balance. If the new Pokemon stats are too similar to those of existing Pokemon, they risk being redundant and boring. If all the stats are strictly better than those of existing Mons, well, that's how you get power creep. So it seems like the sweet spot is crafting Mons with stats that fill a niche that is not currently filled. They serve a role that is currently open. And that's the focus of this video as we hone in on the grass type today, and set out to design the ideal missing grass type Pokemon that would be best to introduce in Generation 10. We'll figure out what ideal stats it needs to have, and then I'll make my best attempt at drawing this guy. Why the grass type, you might be asking? Well, grass types kinda got the short end of the stick in one of my last videos, and y'all really let me hear about it in the comments, so I thought today let's do them some justice. Let's flash back. Let's assume the year is 2002, and Pokemon Gen 3, Ruby and Sapphire, my favorite generation, are about to come out. In the first two generations, you've got 23 grass types, excluding the mythical Celebi, and I'll note here that we're excluding all the mythical and legendary and paradox Ultra Beasts, all those special categories of Pokemon to keep all this more grounded. To start answering our question about which new grass-type Pokemon would be best to introduce in Generation 3, let's start simple and assume that Pokemon just have two stats, attack and defense. This is going to make things a lot easier to plot in 2 dimensions for us. Here's the attack and defense stats plotted for those 23 grass-type Mons, and let me just ask you, where would you put a new Pokemon, on this plot that makes the most sense to you? Thinking about it for a second, we probably don't want to pick a point that's close to any existing point because holding abilities, dual typings, etc. constant for just a second. That would mean that our new Pokemon is a stat clone of an existing Pokemon, and that's just boring. What we also want to avoid is putting our new point way at the top right of this diagram, and just clearly superior in attack and defense to every other existing Mon, because that just makes the game way less fun and promotes power creep. It seems like if I had to describe this logic in a fuzzy way, we want to put the new point far enough away from all of the existing points, but still within the general shape enclosed by all of the existing points. Like maybe here, or maybe over here with an attack stat around 50 and a defense nearly at 100. But how do we formalize that ask mathematically? Well, we can start by drawing the shape thing that is just enough to enclose all of the existing points, and leave it to mathematicians to come up with the most complicated sounding names for stuff like this. If you're curious, this is called the convex hull of this set of points. So first off, we're looking for a point that is within the convex hull to avoid power creep. But the other ask seems a little bit trickier to translate to math. What we want is a point that's kind of far from all of the other points. My research in solving these types of problems led me to a diagram that was completely new to me, and before I give you its name, let me draw it on top of our chart and explain what the heck it does. This diagram, besides looking like some crazy beehive, splits our space up into regions, such that if you pick any point inside of a given region, that point's closest neighbor is the existing point at the center of that region. Now, if that sounds confusing, let's look at Bayleef as a concrete example. If you pick any new point in Bayleef's region, and ask the question, who is the closest existing Mon to this new point, the answer will always be Bayleef. Similarly, if you pick any new point in Bellsprout's region and ask the question, who is the closest existing Mon to this new point, Bellsprout will be the answer. So why is this diagram, which by the way folks is called a Voronoi diagram, why is it useful here? To answer that, let's think about what it means for a point to be at the intersection of some of these lines that we drew. What that means is that that new point that we put at the intersection is equidistant or equally far away from a bunch of existing points, which is literally what we're asking for here. What this means is that this entire problem boils down to simply iterating over all of these intersection points, called Voronoi vertices, and picking the one which is furthest away from its closest neighbors. We do exactly that, and what we find mathematically is exactly what we identified by gut feeling. We can see that this point is intuitively pretty far away from its closest grass-type neighbors, who, by the way, are Tangela, Execute, and Bayleef. And all we need to do now is just expand this logic to 6 stats. We can't draw scatter plots in 6 dimensions because we're just simple 3-dimensional beings, but what we can do to still visualize this is switch over to these radar plots instead. So this is what the average stats for each grass type looks like in the first 2 generations. You can think of it as a fuzzy snapshot of what a typical grass type looks like pre-Gen 3. And we find that the ideal grass type that we would add in Generation 3 using our method has the following stats. About average special defense and speed, and much lower than average in the other 4 stats. And the big burning question now is which Gen 3 Mon got closest to this ideal? Well, drumroll please, the answer is Lombre. We see that it's honestly a really good fit. It gets within 5 points of the ideal on every single stat except HP, where it's 15 points higher than what we would like. Obviously we did Gen 3, so we gotta go through all the other generations. If you're wondering why we didn't start with Gen 2, it's because there weren't yet 2 special stats in Gen 1. But if we retroactively apply the Gen 1 stats today and pretend like they existed back when Gen 1 came out, and then we ask what the ideal Gen 2 Grassmon would have been, then the answer is amazingly Chikorita. Literally a perfect match in 4 of the 6 stats, but having more defense and less special attack than we would like. Skipping to Gen 4, we see that we ideally want a Grassmon that is about average in attack and special defense and a bit higher in every other stat. We see that the best fit is Abomasnow, but to be honest, it's not that great of a fit, only loosely fitting the bill. What that does mean though is that going into Gen 5, that ask from Gen 4 still holds, and we see that in the ideal resume for a Gen 5 Grassmon, we want something with higher than average in all stats except special defense. And we find that the Gen 5 grass Pokemon that fits the bill, and fits pretty well there, is Leavanny. I think y'all are starting to get the idea, so let's just rapid fire through the rest of the generations here. We see that going into Gen 6, the ask is for something with more attack and especially defense than average, and we find the closest thing is Quilladin. Funnily enough, in Gen 7, we also get the middle stage of the grass starter evolutionary line, we get Dartrix, but the fit isn't too great here. Going into Gen 8, we find that the best fit is Flapple. It's a pretty good fit except for the slightly higher attack and lower defense than we would ideally want. And this is a good time to note that it gets harder and harder as the generations move on for any new grass-type Mon to find a unique niche, since there's just more grass-type Mons overall, and there's fewer gaps to fill. Finally in Gen 9, funnily enough, we get Dipplin, which is honestly an amazing fit, basically exactly what we asked for, a grass-type Mon with way higher defense than average. And now we get to the really fun part of the video. With Gen 10 on the horizon, what does the ideal new grass type look like? What gap is even left to fill after 9 generations of grass types? It turns out, the resume we're looking for is a new grass type Pokemon with about 20 points higher attack than average, and a whopping 40 extra points of defense than average. I wanted to take a shot at drawing this guy, but I wanted to draw some inspiration from the existing grass-type Mons we have across all 9 generations. So what I did was for each stat, I found the existing Grassmon, whose stat is just lower or just higher than the ideal stat we want. And we take some thematic inspiration from one Mon in each row here. And what I came up with was Grimvine. It's got Ferrothorn's Thorns, Gourgeist's typing, Swadloon's body type, Lurantis's pants color on that little flower that I put over here, Carnivine's leaves, and Quilladin's feet. And I put a mushroom on the top so it gets to use Spore. I imagine this guy is a middle stage evolution in some 3-stage line. Bonus points to any viewers who can come up with the pre-evolution and the next evolution of this guy here. And there you have it, folks, the 9 iconic grass types across Pokemon's history. The trailblazers who carved out a niche for themselves. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Any comments are welcome below, and I'll see all of you wonderful, wonderful people next time.